Welcome back to Apollo 8 Revisited, Part 4. I'm Art. So once the astronauts jettisoned the last stage of the Saturn V rocket, they turned the ship around and took some pictures of the last stage. As they did, they were able to see something crazy. The Earth as a whole sphere. And this was the first time in history that humans were able to see firsthand the Earth as a whole. Alright, so the next part actually comes word for word from Wikipedia, partially because of time, but also because of its content. I urge you to use your imagination for this one. Quote, 11 hours into the flight, the crew had been awake for over 16 hours. Before launch, NASA had decided that at least one crew member should be awake at all times to deal with any issues that might arise. Frank Borman started the first sleep shift, but between the constant radio chatter and mechanical noises, he found sleep difficult. After about an hour after his sleeping shift started, Borman requested clearance to take a Seconal sleeping pill. However, the pill had little effect. Borman eventually fell asleep, but then awoke feeling ill. He vomited twice and had a bout of diarrhea that left the spacecraft full of small globules of vomit and feces that the crew cleaned up to the best of their abilities. Frank Borman initially decided that he did not want everyone to know about his medical problems, but Lovell and Anders wanted to inform Mission Control. The crew decided to use the Data Storage Equipment, or DSE, which could tape voice recording and telemetry and dump them to Mission Control at high speed. After recording a description of Borman's illness, they requested that Mission Control check the recording, stating that they would like an evaluation of the voice comments. The Apollo 8 crew and Mission Control medical personnel held a conference using an unoccupied second-floor control room. See, there were two identical control rooms in Houston on the second and third floor, only one of which would be used during a mission. The conference participants decided that there was little to worry about, and that Borman's illness was either a 24-hour flu, as Borman thought, or a reaction to the sleeping pill. Researchers now believe that he was suffering from space adaptation syndrome, which affects about a third of astronauts during their first day in space, as their vestibular system adapts to weightlessness. Unquote. Borman soon recovered from his sickness, and the rest of the mission was a go. The crew completed enough mid-course corrections, and now it's time for the Lunar Orbit Insertion, or LOI. The crew will flip the ship so that its backside is aimed front and fire its engines. This is known as a retrograde burn. The retro burn will slow the ship enough to where the moon's gravity will keep the ship in orbit. Because this was done on the backside of the moon, the signal will be blocked until the ship can once again point its antennas straight to Earth. Earth wouldn't know if this burn was successful until the ship emerged from the other side of the moon. If so, they would begin their 10 revolutions around the moon. If not, luckily the trajectory would simply bring them back to Earth. The Apollo 8 crew were the first humans to see the backside of the moon firsthand. Oh, and another thing. Once the craft completed its moon orbits, the only way back home was another successful burn from the backside of the moon. If for some reason it failed, the astronauts would be stuck in lunar orbit. There was no contingency plan for this case. They would be lost. By the way, enjoy the backside of the moon while I continue to explain to you these things. The ship carried many handheld picture and motion cameras the crew would use to bring back observational data to Earth, and so that they can also broadcast directly to Earth from the from their moon trek. The video camera they used was 2 kilograms, black and white, and had 2 lenses, telephoto and wide. So the crew held 5 live broadcasts. During these broadcasts, they would send personal greetings, tour the inside of the spacecraft, talk about life in space, show the Earth from their vantage point, describe the lunar surface, and read from the Bible. The Bible reading was the most watched broadcast at that time. So we've got LOI in another 30 seconds. Now this LOI here will only last 3 minutes. The real one lasted a little over 4 minutes. The reason being is for some reason it's not working the way it's supposed to in the simulation. Shh. Alright, so here we go. 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1, burn! And we are burning. Okay. So, anyways, while we're burning, what you see right here is basically the command service module and the command service module. The command module and the service module. What you see there is basically what is left of this. This is a replica of the Saturn V rocket with the Apollo command module and service modules right here. All this has already done its job. It's already taken this to the moon. Well, minus this little thing. So, once again, it gives you a little bit of a scale of how big everything really is and how small we really are. So anyways, carrying on for now, after the crew read the first 10 lines of Genesis from the Bible, an atheist, I'm an atheist by the way, tried to sue the United States government, claiming that her First Amendment rights had been violated. The lawsuit was thrown out, however, due to the lack of jurisdiction. 6 months later, when the Apollo 11 lunar module landed on the surface of the moon, Buzz Aldrin would hold a communion. Since the Genesis reading brought on such a reaction, Buzz agreed to keep it private, though he didn't stay silent about it. By the way, if you're wondering how the propulsion system actually works in space, the service module uses Aerozyne 50 as fuel and nitrogen tetroxide as oxidizer. It's pressurized with helium, and with the pressure you release it and, well, yeah, force. The Apollo 8 mission is basically what made the Apollo 11 mission possible. If it wasn't for this, if this mission wasn't successful, most likely we weren't going to go to the moon. So, anyways, we've got on this burn we've got another 20 seconds, and after that we should be in lunar orbit basically. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bah! Burn is complete. Thank you very much. So the Apollo 8 mission bookended 1968, a tumultuous year. Whether it would end in a good footing or bad depended on the survival of 3 humans 300,000 kilometers from home. Shortly after Robert Kennedy's assassination, The Republican Party, for their convention, chose Richard Nixon as their candidate for president. Outside the Democratic convention, police began beating demonstrators. And the mayor of Chicago defended it by saying the policeman isn't there to create disorder, the policeman is there to preserve disorder, unquote. Also, the Soviets invaded Czechoslovakia, demonstrators are killed or injured in Mexico, and the U.S. draft cards are burned, and the Apollo 6, 7, and 8 missions took place. The Apollo 8 astronauts behind the moon were isolated from the Earth. The astronauts felt the craft begin to slow as the retro burn pushed back against the craft's previous speed. 4 minutes later, they slowed enough for the moon's gravity to hold on to it. Coming out on the other side, the Apollo 8 astronauts were the first humans to enter the gravitational field of another celestial body and to orbit it. So, once they completed that, Frank Borman, commander, turned the craft to where they can see the surface of the moon. The moon looked like an endless gray pitted desert. Craters on the side of mountains, craters inside of valleys, craters inside of craters. In fact,
the craters are all rounded off. There's quite a few of them. Some of them are newer. Many of them look like, especially the round ones, look like hit by meteorites or projectiles of some sort. Langrenus is quite a huge crater. It's got a central cone to it. And the walls of the crater are terraced, about 6 or 7 different terraces on the way down. Roger, understand. And coming up now to see a fertility of the old friends Messier and Pickering that I looked about so much on Earth. I can see the rays coming out of, I believe, Pickering. We're coming up now near our B1 initial site, which I'm going to try and see. Be advised, the round window, the hatch window, is completely iced over and we cannot use it. Bill Meyer is showing a rendezvous window.
Apollo 8 Houston, roger. Got any more information on those rays, over?
Roger, the rays out of Pickering are quite faint from here. There are 2 different groups going to the west. They don't appear to be have any depth to them at all, just rays coming out.
Roger.
They look like just changes in the color of the Mare.
so that was the actual...
Apollo 8 Houston, what does the old moon look like from 60 miles, over?
Oh, I think that's what you missed.
Okay, Houston, the moon is essentially gray. No color. Looks like plaster of Paris.
Yeah, okay. So, anyways... After a few revolutions, Borman turned the shuttlecraft so that Lovell could update his navigation findings. As they did, Borman saw something that he would never forget. From Earth, we've seen the moon rise in orbit around the moon. On Earth, we've seen the moon rise. In orbit around the moon, the Apollo 8 astronauts were the first ones to see an Earthrise. firsthand. They scrambled to take pictures, but were mostly in silent awe of the reality of what they were viewing. Decades later, Carl Sagan would describe a picture of the Earth from beyond the orbits of the planet, saying, "The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors so that in glory and triumph they could become momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Our planet is a lonely speck in a great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all its vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves." Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. I explained to you in the previous parts how crazy 1968 was. However, 1968 was also an Olympic year, Winter Olympic year. 2001, A Space Odyssey and Planet of the Apes were premiered. The Civil Rights Act of 1968 was signed into law. Hair opened on Broadway, Hot Wheels were introduced, the Beatles released the White Album, and Apollo 6, 7, and 8 were successful. Not only that, but Apollo 8 brought back with it the reality that despite our vast differences, we are all one. It seems that many of us have forgotten that. This year, the U.S. also had a hellish election year. Arab Spring continues, the Greek debt crisis, factory fires killing hundreds. We've had demonstrations and hurricanes. The man who would soon become the first human to step foot on the moon, Neil Armstrong, died this year. And the troubled people who go on killing rampages have left countless suffering. But this year, also an Olympic year, the Higgs boson was discovered. The Mars rover Curiosity successfully landed on Mars. The first bionic eye implant was successfully performed. We've seen wonderful movies like Lincoln and the Hobbit, and someone successfully skydove from space, and on the way down, traveling faster than the speed of sound. There is nothing more powerful than the human spirit. Here are some quotes from astronauts as they reflected on seeing the Earth from so far up. Frank Borman said, "When you're finally up at the moon, looking back on Earth, all those differences and nationalistic traits are pretty well going to blend. You're going to get a concept that maybe this really is one world. And why the hell can't we learn to live together like decent people?" Bill Anders said, "It's tiny out there. It's inconsequential. It's ironic that we had come to study the moon, and it was really discovering the Earth." Jim Lovell said, "We learned a lot about the moon, but what we really learned was about the Earth. The fact that just from this distance of the moon, you could put your thumb up and you can hide the Earth behind your thumb. Everything that you've ever known, your loved ones, your business, the problems of Earth itself, all behind your thumb. And how insignificant we really are. But then how fortunate we are to have this body and to be able to joy living here amongst the beauty of the earth itself.